What's up, everybody? This is Frank from Fan Sports New York, and for this video, we're going to be previewing the teams from Section 1B. We have a lot of teams here. I want to thank you guys for joining us so much. If you're new, we're going to be overviewing some of the teams, or all of the teams in 1B, which is about 17 teams. I'm going to be talking about kind of the overlook of the team, some players to look out for. Just a quick announcement. If I don't announce your name, it doesn't mean I don't think you're a good player or you can't have a strong year. But with all these teams, I want this video to go on for just so long. So got to limit the amount of people I talk about. And there's also conversations I've had with the coaches as well. So the first one up is some newcomers. We have some guys coming down from A. We got some guys coming up from C, from the Hudson Valley Football League. This is a jam-packed league, and this is a league with a lot of quarterbacks. And let's start with some newcomers. First one up is Rye, right? We know about Rye. They've been a powerhouse in A for a long time, coached by Dino Gar, who's third all-time in wins in New York State. Last year, they went 9-2 in A. They lost to Somers in the championship game. They are 36-6 the last 4 years, including 10 straight years of 6 or more wins. This is a team that wins a lot. They're bringing back also a boatload of talent, even though they had some transfers. And they are the favorite in B, in my opinion. Them and Pleasantville are the top two, and for good reason. When we talk about returning 6 starters on the offense, 3 on the offensive line, bringing back their quarterback. Defensively, they're also bringing back 6 starters. And again, when I'm looking at this team, you have a couple guys transfer out, but I think they're still strong, very strong up front on the offensive and defensive line, and at the wide receiver and skill position with their returning quarterback, which puts a lot of pressure. Now, the big question for me is the running back spot, and that rest of that offensive line. How are they going to shore that up is going to be important. Let's talk about some of the players to watch. The first one is their quarterback, A.J. Miller, a very talented senior. Frank's finest quarterback, 6'3", 195 pounds, had a tremendous year last year. Ball just flies right out of his hand. Another one is tight end and outside linebacker, Jake Kesner, the junior. All the tools in the world. Strong two-way player. He could really pop off this year. At 6'4", 225 pounds, at that outside linebacker spot was disruptive. And as a tight end, you can have him in line. You can have him as an H-back. You can flex him out. Shepard Griffiths is another one, wide receiver and defensive back, 6'3", 185 pounds, super talented athlete. Probably going to be the number one target for them. Then let's go to some of the big men up front. Charlie Swarak, the defensive end and offensive lineman, the senior, so disruptive on that defensive line, so stout against the run, 6'2", 225 pounds. Ronan O'Byrne as the offensive tackle, 6'4", 240 pounds. We also have Jason Gonzalez returning on the offensive line, but him at the outside linebacker spot. Again, he generates a lot of tackles. This is a guy who's very active. He can come off the edge. He can move around in space, really long at 6'3". And then a couple other names that you might want to keep an eye on. Keon Turlo is another outside linebacker. This young man, also good size to him. He was very active, coming off the edge, blitzing. Rye has a very aggressive style defense, and they like the versatility of players. Another guy to keep in mind, running back is going to be a big position, right? I'm talking about it, is replacing one of their most productive running backs from last year at over 1,000 yards. Keep an eye on Charlie Garnett. He had some good reps last year. He was a freshman, so could have a huge jump into his sophomore year, has solid size to him as well. Charlie Stevens is another guy who's kind of like that hybrid wide receiver tight end. Could be another weapon. This is a team that has a lot of talent. And if I'm going to make a bold prediction, I will right here. I think they're going to be one of the 2 teams in the finals this year for B. Let's go to another newcomer, and that's Sleepy Hollow. Coached by Jerry Flora. Last year was a struggle. They were 2-7 last year, but they're returning a lot of experience. I think that will make them much more competitive in B. Returning 6 of 11 starters on offense, 3 out of 5 on the offensive line. Do have to replace their quarterback. They had a couple guys battling it out in camp. Defensively, they have 7 of 11 starters coming back. So they got a lot of experience. Now the question is B. Yeah, you come down to B, but B's also got a bunch of teams in it. They also have a bunch of competition. I think it's going to be really strong competition, not B. So how do they handle that? And also, they have 5 road games. So a bunch of road games. They're going to be on the road a lot. They got to be road warriors. Some of the players to watch to me starts on the offensive line with Damone Fedora, also defensive tackle. Big man, about 6'3", 240 pounds. Another guy to keep an eye on, running back and cornerback Braden Richardson, the sophomore. He was a super talented dude, made a bunch of plays as a freshman. This is going to be a year that he really pops off, especially at the running back spot. Super athletic. Another young man, Evan Brown, transferred from Paramus Catholic, the senior. Coach talked about this, another talented young man stepping into, again, a new league. Can make some noise here. He was a Sleepy Hollow resident, so coming back. You have another guy, James McGee, young player on the offensive line. Again, we talk about the trenches. I think B in the trenches is going to be so important. There's a bunch of skill guys coming back. There's a bunch of quarterbacks here. Who can protect the quarterback? Who can get after the quarterback? That's going to be so important here. And then finally, let's talk about the quarterback. Justin Fink, coach, likes the work he put in. This is a captain on the team, the quarterback and defensive back. It's going to be so important in a league with a lot of high-level quarterback play that he steps up for sure. Let's go to another newcomer and probably one of the more surprise teams I think this year. Might not be a surprise since more and more people are talking about them, but that's Nyack. And last year they had a struggle. They went 1-7, but they are returning a bunch of experience with them. Offensively, 8 of 11 starters. 8 of 11 starters coming back. 5 offensive linemen. They do have to replace their quarterback in Fowler, who was very good for them. But everybody else is bringing back a lot of experience. Defensively, 7 of 11 starters coming back. They also have a transfer quarterback coming in, which I'll talk about. The biggest question mark, again, a lot of those offensive line guys coming back, but can they take that next step? Is going to be huge. In depth is also another very important thing for Nyack. This is one of the faster teams, I think, in the league, so speed is not going to be an issue. Some of the players to watch, let's start with that quarterback transferring in. Tylan Blackwell-Williams, Jr., transfer from Paramus, coming in, has good size to him at 6 feet, 195 pounds. This is a guy that Coach raved about his ability. Could be a guy in X Factor that really shines this year. Another guy on that offensive line is Darius Valdez. It's going to be so important blocking and being a defensive lineman up front. 280-pound kid, another very strong guy. Some real physical plays to him. Ray Booten is someone we all know, Frank's finest defensive back. 7 career INTs. He's also a dangerous returner, going to be a weapon for them. And a couple other guys. Sean Claremont, one of their leading rushers, coming back at over 400 yards last year. He's a junior. He also had 80 tackles, right? Important two-way player. And Mateo Massey, another outside linebacker. This, 6'3", 190 pounds, well-rounded defensive player for Nyack. Let's go to the next team. There's another newcomer in Lakeland, coached by Ryan Schilling. I do think there's another team that could surprise some people. Coming from A, coming down to B. They went 5-5 last year. Offensively, they bring back 5 of 11 starters and 3 of them on the offensive line, which is huge. And they're bringing back their quarterback in Grady Leonard, which is so important to this team. Coach talked about the big thing to fix on off. They want their offensive line to be more physical, right? That's going to be a huge thing. He believes that they are going to be bigger and stronger this year, which is important. Defensively, 5 of 11 starters coming back. They have to replace some stud linebackers that they had. So that's going to be really important. Another thing on offense that I forgot to mention, Jennings. They lost Jennings, which was a huge target for them, but they do have a couple wide receivers who can make some plays for them. And let's talk about the players to watch. Starting at the quarterback position in Grady Leonard, the senior. He is super talented. He's a good athlete. This is a dual threat guy who could really hurt you with his arm and legs. He's going to be so important for them. Defensive back and wide receiver Kyle Gallagher was a Frank's finest defensive back, had 3 INTs, was very active as a defensive back, and also had a really strong summer as a wide receiver, so keep an eye on him. And Sean Perry's another one, very shifty wide receiver, was put in the slot, kind of overshadowed by some of the other receivers, but this could be a time to shine for him this year. Another guy to keep in mind, DJ Brody on the defensive side at the linebacker spot. I mentioned filling the void linebacker. He was at the outside linebacker, had over 70 tackles, not a huge guy, but he made a bunch of plays. Defensive back, Nick Gerardo, the senior, is another DB coming back. I do think the Lakeland DBs could be pretty solid this year. And then a couple big guys up front are going to be so important. We talk about the trenches, right? It's going to be huge. Nick Ferrante, the junior, and Kyle Ronk, the sophomore. Young guy, but a lot of raw potential. This guy's 6'2", 230 pounds. Looking for those 2 guys, again, are going to have to be so important if they're going to start making moves up front. So that is Lakeland. Let's go to the next team, guys, and that is Hen Hud with a new football coach and Coach Cole Coyle in his first season. And Hen Hud had a struggle last year. They were 1-7, and they're going through a complete revamp, right? So the offense, they were running a lot of the wing tee stuff. Now they're going into the spread. And what I like when I spoke to Coach is, listen, it's open season, right? It's a clean slate. They're bringing back about, I think, 4 or 5 of the starters from last year, 3 on the offensive line. They do have to replace their quarterback. Joe About is somebody who Coach mentioned has really stepped up at the quarterback spot. Defensively, they're bringing back, I think, about 6 or 7 out of the 11 starters are coming back. So I think Hen Hud can have a bit of a turnaround relatively quickly. Now they're going again. They ran a 4-3 defense. They were doing some 3-3 stack last year. They're going into that 4-3. They want to be aggressive and violent. That's kind of what Hen Hud has been for a while, and it's just continuing that aggressiveness. They had a very strong spring. The coaches were very confident. They think they have a strong framework, and it's getting the kids to buy in. Now, some of the players to watch. First one to me is on the offensive line. There's a Frank's finest, Mason Dietz. Big kid, strong. I think he's moving from center to guard. He's going to be so important up front. Joe Abound, again, the quarterback, smart kid. Coach really raved about him being a leader. A couple wide receivers to keep in mind. Gino Womack, Jeremy Hetty, very good athletes. These are basketball players that could really go up and get the football. Nico Balazia is another guy. Running back and linebacker, he's got such dog in him, and that's such a good thing. Coach described him with no fear, and that's such a nice compliment for a football player. He's not the biggest guy, but he is tough as nails, and that's someone who's going to be very important for them. And also, Brandon Sumter, right? Another offensive and defensive lineman, very raw, but a physical specimen. So keep an eye on those guys for Hen Hud. Let's go to another team, the team that's been winning a long time in this league, and that's Ardsley. Coached by Dan DeFalco in 2022, they went 5-4, lost to Pleasantville in the semifinals. The last 4 years, they've done a lot of winning, right? 23-10. There's a team program that's had a strong JV for multiple years. They're also bringing back a boatload of talent. Offensively, 8 of 11 starters are coming back, 4 out of 5 on the offensive line. They're bringing back their quarterback. And the big thing is, we're bringing all these guys back on the offensive line. They want to see that offensive line take a real big jump, right? There was a little bit of inconsistency last year. This year, they're expecting a huge jump from these guys. Defensively, 6 of 11 starters. They also had a bunch of guys rotating in, so you're seeing a lot of experience here. And for me, Ardsley is one of those teams that I think they went to the semis last year. I'm anticipating they get back there this year. They're talking about all these other teams. Ardsley is a team that I do think, again, I want to say surprised because they've done so much winning over, many years, the recent years. And I think that they continue to be very competitive and contend this season. Some of the players to watch, let's start with the quarterback. Mike Rendy, again, this is a quarterback league. Let's talk about the quarterback. Good size to him at 6'3", 190 pounds. This is another guy who really has some really eye-popping plays on tape. And it's all about the consistency and not turning the ball over. And I do think there's a lot of raw potential with this young man, so definitely keep an eye on him. We know about the next two, which is Ben Silverman. Again, that athlete, running back and linebacker, real weapon for them that can move around and make a bunch of plays for you. He's going to be so important for this team offensively. Shane Speckman on that D-line and offensive line, very disruptive on that D-line. A bit undersized, but I still love his motor and his ability to be disruptive. Michael Sanfilippo, he's one of the bigger guys up front, that offensive lineman and defensive lineman. He's going to be so important as well. We also have Ethan Kaplan, the senior, 6 feet, 200 pounds, in the trenches, right? He's going to be so big. The teams that separate themselves are going to be able to establish things up front because there's a lot of skill guys. Who establishes the trench is going to be huge. Anthony Chenard is another one. Wide receiver and defensive back. Good-sized kid. He was one of their leading receivers last year. And I think he's going to have to be a really important two-way player for them. So that's Ardsley, guys. We are keep humming along. Next up, let's talk about a team that was in the section finals last year. Byram Hills, coached by Coach Burke. And again, last 2 years have been pretty darn strong, including last year when they go 9-2. They lost the section title to Pleasantville in a heartbreaking fashion. Had a couple of heartbreakers on some of those 2 losses. But they have a bunch of kids they're going to have to replace, but they're also bringing back some guys as well. So offensively is where they're bringing back more people, 6 of 11 starters, 2 on the offensive line. They are bringing back their quarterback, which is, again, a very talented quarterback, which we'll talk about. And the big thing offensively, they're trying to be more balanced, right? So they want to be a little bit more 50-50. They want to be able to, again, keep teams off balance, but not leaning in one direction. Defensively, 4 out of 11 starters are coming back. You got to replace Big George, which is going to be always tough. Two-way player, but again, I do think they have some talented guys. And I think, again, Byram Hills is going to be competitive. B is going to be so tough with all these teams, and because these guys have talent. And let's start with players to watch. First one, quarterback, John Accurso, the senior, 6'2", 195 pounds. I love what I heard at Media Day when My favorite questions are the ones I ask, would you get better at, right? The ones I don't like with my coach hat on is, which team do you want to play, right? I hate those questions, but I love when it's asked, what did you improve on? And a player evaluating himself. And he says, I took too many chances. I went with a deep ball. I didn't take what the defense was giving me. And that's something I saw too. So I'm really, I'm excited for his growth here. Let's talk about some other guys, two running backs. Luke Weiler, such an important player for them. He put on a lot of muscle. He's kind of like, again, that versatile weapon. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. He's obviously a big-time special teams player for them. Isaac Burfield, coach talked about, another good-sized kid. They're also going to be DBs for them too, so important two-way players. Let's talk about that Owen defensive line. Greg Postian, the senior. I also apologize if I mispronounce your name, but the coach was really impressed with him stepping up during this offseason and in summer. Jack Quinn on the offensive line, and at linebacker, super active linebacker, had over 100 tackles last year. Those guys are going to be so important in the trenches and in the middle of that defense. Dario Amachuchi, the senior. It is another kid that I also really like his size, right? 5'11", 193 pounds. Again, they got some dudes. It's going to take, they had to replace some receivers, had to replace a stud running back, and there's going to be multiple guys I think that can help do that. Another guy as a weapon on the outside, Tyler Mascott, the junior. There's another guy, speedster, also decent size, 6 feet, 175 pounds. So those are some of the guys from Byram Hills. I do think Byram Hills will be, again, competitive. The ceiling of them, I'm not sure, right? You want to see how some of these weapons step up to replace some of the senior production that they had last year, but this is a team that's got some talent. Let's go to the next team, which is Pearl River. Coached by Coach Oliva. Last year, they were 4-5. They lost to Ardsley in the quarters in the playoffs. They're also returning a bunch of guys, but the big question is going to be up front, right, for them. They're returning some skill guys. Offensively, 6 of 11 starters coming back. On the offensive line, only 1. But they do bring back their young quarterback, who also has some big potential to him. And Coach talked about they want to get more explosive. That's going to be a huge thing on offense. Defensively, 5 of 11 starters coming back. So they want to be more explosive on offense, more aggressive on defense. That's kind of the mixture that Coach emphasized to me. And some of the players to watch. Let's start with a running back defensive end. Nick Espinal, the senior, downhill runner, strong runner, at 5'11", 195 pounds, really physical. Another guy I like, wide receiver and defensive back, Degon McLaughlin. I think could be a really good two-way player, shifty wide receiver, and also very aggressive free safety. He can play some man and high safety. Jack Whalen, the quarterback, sophomore year last year, so again, there was so much raw, but there was also some really nice plays that I saw, and Coach raved about his jump from last year to this year. They're very excited, and I'm very excited because you can see the raw potential on tape. So I'm excited to see this young man in action. A couple other guys, Patrick Morisi on the offensive line and defensive line is going to be super important. Again, only 1 out of 5 offensive linemen coming back. He's got to help lead that charge. How do they shore up the rest of that offensive line? He's going to be super important. Anthony Graziano, tight end and defensive back, is another player. Coach really liked his work this offseason in the summer. Leon Najaj, defensive end and tight end, another one Coach mentioned. These are kids that have put in the time, put in the work, and impressed them through their offseason campaign. A couple of receivers too. Michael Squilini and Brendan Carlacci, wide receivers and defensive backs. Again, they have some of these skill guys who can make plays for you, but in the trench is going to be huge. That's what's going to separate, I think, these teams, is how good the offensive line and defensive line shape up. All right, let's go to the next team, guys, and that's Nanuet. Coached by Phil Carbone. Last year, 6-3, another strong year. They've had back-to-back really strong seasons now. They lost to Byram's in the semifinals. Didn't get to speak with Coach, but they're another team that had to replace some big-time talent, including a guy like Moran, their running back and defensive back. But again, one thing I know about Nanuet, they always got some toughness to them. They always got some grit to them that I always like. And one of the big players to watch out for, Jack O'Sullivan, defensive end, tight end. He's also a kicker and punter. And everyone knows about his kicking and punting. Fantastic special teams, but I also think he's a darn good defensive end. He had 6 sacks, over 50 tackles. Good size to him at 6'4", 215. Impressive guy. Another one, Mike Cesario, linebacker and running back. He had over 80 tackles last year. Super active defensive player for them. He's going to be so important on the defensive side of the ball. Vincent Duffy, a fullback and defensive back as well, junior, made some plays as a sophomore. could see that big jump this upcoming year. Andrew Hastings on the offensive line, multi-year varsity player. This is another guy up front who's going to have to help. Again, we talk about the trenches. He's going to have to lead the way on that offensive line. Colin Stemmerman in the linebacker spot. I think Manny Red linebacker-wise could be pretty solid. Keep an eye out for some of these players. All right, let's go to the B champion, right? So we talk about all these teams, and then we finally get to Pleasantville. And, Pleasantville, probably the first ever back-to-back champion, which is not favored, right? You talk about Rye, you talk about all these teams from A, but Pleasantville's sitting there like, hey, we're still the big dog here. And they're also bringing back a bunch of skill guys. So, they're 12-1. They've got now back-to-back 12-1 seasons. They're looking for a three-peat, which is super difficult. But hey, I think they got some of the guns that they might be able to make another run here. Offensively, they're bringing back 6 of 11 starters, but none on the offensive line, right? So that's going to be the big thing for them. But they get to bring back their quarterback. They get to bring back one of the best players in the section, if not, top 3 in the entire section. Defensively, also 6 or 7 starters coming back. But on that defensive line, right, you have to replace a bunch of guys up front. So the trenches are the big question for Pleasantville. It's not the skill guy. The linebacking core could be very strong on this defense, which I think it is. Some of the players to watch, obviously Daniel Picard is the first one that comes up in mind. Could be the best player in the class, one of the best players in the section. Super elusive, going to be so important again this season. Aiden Picard is another one. I mean, Coach talked about how he's just solid and steady, and they believe he's going to get more involved in the running game this year, right? So they want to use some of his legs that they didn't do as much last year. But this is a guy with some good size. Eric Coleman, also one of the big weapons for this team as a wide receiver. Very shifty guy, very fast. He's going to be really important. And then let's talk a little bit defense. Ryan Horrigan, we know about him at the linebacker spot. One of the best linebackers as well. Super active, flows, attacks downhill, makes solid tackles. Michael Hudzinski at the strong safety spot. Again, had such a strong year last year. He's acts like another linebacker at the safety spot. Also improved so much in his pass coverage. He's going to be huge. Louis Sadow is somebody who was really on a young player last year, going into the running back spot, going into the linebacker spot, and made some nice plays for them. And he's going to be another important player, being a junior. What's the growth from his sophomore to junior year? It's going to be another big one. You got Fitzpatrick Byrne. Again, they're not bringing back a lot of linemen, but he is the young man that is the captain of that O-line, right? So he's going to be a big part of this, is getting the guys around him, getting them in sync with each other. It's going to be so important. Another couple guys. Again, I think this defense in the back end could be really strong. You got Shane Mueller, cornerback, young man, junior. Can also make some big-time plays. You got Brian McPhee at the linebacker spot, another kid. And then you even got Emmett McDermott, another defensive back. So, they're bringing back some experience. They're bringing back some dudes who can run, make some plays. They can get the trenches, guys. Pleasantville could be right back in that championship game. Let's go to the next team, guys. And next up is Briarcliff Hamilton Football Program. Coached by Coach Skip Stevens. And last year, they were 2-7, right? So a bit of a struggle. They also got to replace a bunch of guys. Offensively, they bring back 4 out of 11 starters. But the big thing is 3 out of the 5 on the offensive line. So they do bring back some veteran on the offensive line up front. They do have to replace their quarterback. The big thing Coach talked about, they're going to have to rely on that offensive line. They're going to have to be more physical and run the ball better this season. Defensively, also replacing a lot of guys. 3 out of 11 starters are coming back, so you got to replace 8 guys. It's going to be super important. The biggest question mark, Coach brought it up, is that inexperience, right? You got 8 starters on defense. You got to replace 7 starters on offense. New quarterback, so there's a lot of moving parts here. But a couple players to watch that Coach shared with me that has really impressed him. John Awai, the senior offensive lineman and linebacker. Again, up front is going to be so important. They're going to have to rely on that front to really move the football. Luke Murray, wide receiver and free safety. Again, they had to replace a stud wide receiver, trying to get those weapons. Running back Henry Fox, Chase Sadaka, both juniors. They're relying on a bunch of young guys. You got Chris Fertucci, another young guy playing running back, linebacker. Again, they're looking for guys who are going to step up, take the mantle this year. A couple of offensive linemen, a young one right now, Tyler Gualtieri. He made some impressive plays that I actually did see on tape on Briarcliff as a freshman. So on that offensive line, defensive line, this could be somebody who can really pop off this year. AJ Milano is another one on the offensive and defensive fronts. So again, I think they're going to have to rely on that offensive line. especially early, until they get the rest of the skill position figured out. And some of these young guys could step up and make some big plays for you. That's Briarcliff Hamilton. Let's go to the next team, which is Putnam Valley, coached by Coach Ryan Eslier. Last year they were 2-6. Right, they had a bunch of close games. They had some pretty bad injuries, but they're also bringing back a boatload of talent. And to me, Putnam Valley is another team that could be pretty competitive this year. Bringing back 7 starters on offense, 2 out of 5 on the offensive line. Now they do have to replace their quarterback. 2 quarterbacks battling it out, but they have multiple threats to move the football, and that's what they want to utilize. They're probably going to spread things around because they got some players on offense who could be pretty darn good. Defensively, 4 out of 11 starters coming up. They gave up a bunch of big plays on third down. That's kind of been the emphasis that Coach shared with me. And some of the players to watch, guys, Caden Glenn to me is the first one I want to mention because there's so much raw potential here. Good-sized kid. He's a junior. Wide receiver and linebacker are going to be so important. And you see a bunch of talent in the wide receiver spot. I'm interested to see him on the other side of the ball as well. Can he be a two-way star in Putnam Valley? Coach is looking for defensive guys to step up. Running back Ricky Meister, another guy that had such a strong year last year running the football. Shifty guy, able to run through contact. He's going to be another guy that's so important. I think they're going to have to rely on this running game to open things up in the passing game. A couple of linemen, though. Alex Jashaj, who's a Frank's finest defensive lineman. You've seen him grow year in, year out. 3-year varsity player. And Dylan Tucker, Coach raved about him. He came up as a sophomore. He's going to be a junior. He was really strong for them last year. Expect to see a big jump. This could be the X factor as well with Caden for this team. Finally, Marcos Oliveira, wide receiver and defensive back. This is, again, a very talented young man. I really liked him as a defensive back. He had some strong cover skills. Can he make some play on the wide receiver spot as well? You can see some of the weapons here. Nick Grippo is another young man at the running back spot, so they have some of the weapons. Got to get 3 starters on the offensive line. Defensively is where Coach really emphasized who's going to step up and make plays for them. It's going to be huge for them. All right, guys, let's go to the next team, which is Rhinebeck, coached by Darren Bika. It was a tough year last year, 1-7, but again, they're going to have some starters that they're going to have to replace, but I do like some of the kids that are coming back as well. 4 out of 11 starters on the offense, 2 out of 5 on the offensive line, and they're bringing back their quarterback, and their quarterback and Hunter Merkel is going to Pomona College to play. So this is another quarterback that, again, in this league filled with quarterbacks who could be a big playmaker and X factor for them. Defensively, 4 out of 11 starters are coming back. They're looking for improvements all around, right? Again, has a lot of young players mixing with some veterans. Their quarterback is obviously the big one, Hunter Merkel, who was pretty darn impressive when I watched him. He's going to be so important for this team, both as a player and a leader. Joseph Saldiveri is a young guy, junior, defensive end, offensive guard. His season got cut short last year. They're expecting big things from him this season. We also have Kyle Snow, running back and linebacker. He's taking over as the main rusher for the running back that graduated. Coach really believes that he can have a strong year. So Rhinebeck, again, to me, it's going to be interesting, right? If they can figure out some of the things on the offensive line, they can protect Hunter. Is going to be so important because he can make some plays for you. So I'm interested to see what happens with Rhinebeck. Let's talk about the next team, Croton Harmon, coached by Coach Callahan. 2-6 last year. Didn't get to speak with Coach, unfortunately, but there are some players that have really intrigued me about Croton Harmon as well. They do have to replace some D lineman that was really good for them last year. But Jacob Jones at the quarterback and linebacker spot, really like him. I love his toughness at the linebacker spot. He was a Frank's finest. He's a pretty rangy linebacker, hard thumper when he lines you up, makes some really nice tackles. And at the quarterback spot, hoping to see again that improvement in his ability to throw, his ability to run, make reads, the correct ones. We got Ben Reed, another one, the running back and defensive back spot, and a multi-year guy, 5'11", 180 pounds. Let's talk about a couple of linemen that are going to be so important in this league, is in the trenches. I keep emphasizing because it's so important with all these skill guys. It's who can control up front. Aiden Nikic is a guy, a senior, and Jack Urich, both on the offensive and defensive lines, are going to be such important roles. A couple wide receivers too that could be X factors. Orlando Gomez, Carter Schmidt, right? These are decent sized wide receivers. Again, who's going to separate themselves for Croton Harmon in such a competitive league is going to be so important. All right, guys, we're almost done. A couple teams left. Irvington is up. And, speaking about Irvington, again, didn't get to speak to the coach. Last year they were 3-5. They have a couple kids that could be real X factors for their team. And the first one to me starts with their running back, Marcus Camp, the senior. This young man, 5'9", 160 pounds. But this guy can move. I mean, he is super explosive. He was a Frank's finest running back, deservingly so. He's been a multi-year guy on the varsity, and he's probably the best playmaker, one of the best playmakers in the class, and they want to probably get him out on the edge as much as possible. He also has a really nice juke move. Another guy to keep in mind, Jacob Constantine on the offensive and defensive line. Strong, good-sized kid, the senior. Going to be so important in the trenches again. And maybe a guy like Jaden Jarrett, the junior, a good size, him at 6'3", 170 pounds, wide receiver and cornerback. Again, there's a lot of mystery in Irvington, with new coach, how the program's going. But again, relying on some of these guys is going to be so important for them to be competitive this year. Let's go to the next team, which is, again, Hastings, coached by Coach O'Hare. And again, the terrible news about Blindbrook canceling their season, and normally they would be talked about in C, but there's an opportunity that they might be merging with Hastings to bring on some of those players, which I think is so great, even though it's such a terrible story. Football's such a great sport that you want these programs to stay healthy and alive, but having an opportunity here maybe in mid-October, which could be a nice boost for Hastings to bring in a couple bodies. So I will talk about a Blindbrook player in this point as well. But let's just start with Hastings. And again, last year was a bit of a rough year, but I tell you what, coach is excited. I saw him on his media day, getting 40 kids in the program. Talk about them merging with Blindbrook. Offensively, they're bringing back some talent. I think Hastings, again, it kind of it's weird in B. It's not two exact leagues, right? But they have a way that they're playing each other, which I'm not exactly 100% sure, but the schedule, they kind of have it like branched differently. But Hastings, I think, could be competitive on their side, if we're going to call it that. 7 of 11 starters coming back on offense, including 3 out of 5 on the offensive line. Now, they had a very productive quarterback they're going to have to replace, right? So there's a couple guys that can battle it out. I'm interested to see how that ended up being. Defensively, 6 out of 11 starters coming back, so new quarterback, but the goal is they want to get to 500, and I think, I'm going to say this, I think they do it this year. I really do. Again, it's going to be because of some of these players I'm about to mention. The first one is Keith Capuano, right? He was injured last year. The season before, he had over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns, also very active outside linebacker. He could be one of the best players in the class when fully healthy. And I know he was talking on the media day that he's really a basketball player at heart, but he could do both. I tell you what, you should leave his options open because I think he could be a fantastic football player. He's got a good size to him at 6'4". Definitely keep that one open. They also have a couple linemen that are going to be so important. Jason Wyatt, he was a Frank's finest on the offensive line, big, strong guard, also defensive tackle. James Constantine, a 4-year center for them. So again, if you can battle in the trenches, I think you have a legit chance. Question is, can they get the quarterback position? And then Andrew Barrier is another one, offensive lineman and linebacker. They can hold up front. That's going to be really good for them. Keith Capuano is a serious weapon. And from Blindbrook, if they're able to merge a guy like Rob Carey, who's a running back, outside linebacker, could be a really nice boost as a two-way player for them. I thought he was pretty solid as an outside linebacker. Also ran the ball pretty hard last year. So, again, interesting about Hastings. Then we'll get to the final team, guys, and that's Edgemont. And Edgemont, again, is a scrappy team. They've had a couple good years in a row now by Coach Pappy. Last year they were 5-3. They're also bringing back some dudes as well. So offensively, 5 of 11 starters coming back, 3 out of 5 on the O-line. Do have to replace their quarterback, but David Larson did get some reps, so he's stepping in. They want to be more balanced on offense. Defensively, 5 of 11 starters are coming back. Improving tackling was an emphasis from Coach when I spoke with him. They got to replace some big seniors, right? So it's going to be a big opportunity for some of the younger guys to step up and some of these juniors becoming seniors to really make a name for themselves. The first one to me is Joey Sato, the running back and linebacker. He ran the ball very hard, tough, gritty runner, 5'9", 175 pounds. Is going to be huge. And then the Barlows, David Barlow, the wide receiver. Coach really raved about his work that he's put in. And Will Barlow, the offensive lineman, was a Frank's finest. Also plays linebacker. I love his toughness. Not huge at 6 feet 205, but got a real toughness to him. David Larson, I mentioned earlier at the quarterback spot. Coach really liked getting some reps. last year. Really like the progress he's had coming up to this season. Kenny Sato, the defensive end, 5'11", 170 pounds. He's going to be another guy that's going to be super important this senior. And then Wes Corker at the linebacker spot. So Edgemont has some grittiness to him, but do they have the size, or do they have the physicality that they can compete? I think this is going to be very interesting this season, guys. And with that, guys, that was B. All these different teams, so many different type of quarterbacks, different skill positions. But to me, the big thing is going to be in the trenches, right? So that's going to be huge, guys. And with that, I'm signing out. Peace out.